Root and branch reform. It's
Mm.
a phrase that just has a certain weight to it, doesn't
It
it?
really does. It sounds definitive, muscular.
Exactly. It implies you're walking into a crumbling house,
Mhm.
tearing it down to the studs, and then rebuilding something stronger from the ground up.
Oh, it's the kind of idiom that leaders, CEOs, politicians, they absolutely love it. It signals to everyone, I'm serious, nothing is off the table.
Right. And that is exactly why Sir Mark Rowley, the police commissioner in the UK, he reached for that specific phrase recently. He looked at the state of British policing, and he called the current system a relic from 1962.
Wow, that creates quite a visual.
It does. And he declared that it needs root and branch reform.
And on the surface, that sounds like exactly what's needed. But here's the catch, and it's really the reason we're doing this deep dive today.
Okay.
We have a stack of research and these diagnostic tools here that suggest root and branch might actually be a dangerous metaphor.
Dangerous how? Because it sounds deep,
Hmm.
but maybe it's not deep enough.
Precisely. The sources we're looking at argue that if you are obsessively focused on the roots and the branches, you're ignoring the biological reality of the tree.
You're ignoring the soil.
You're ignoring the soil.
And if the soil is toxic, it doesn't matter how much you prune the branches or, treat the roots.
The tree is doomed. That's the biological reality.
That is a terrifying but a really compelling premise. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to move beyond the press releases. We are unpacking two specific frameworks from our source material.
Right, the bias impact tree and the 6 stages framework, or SSF.
And these aren't just like management buzzwords, are they?
Not at all. These are diagnostic tools. They're designed to answer a very specific and, frankly, a very frustrating question. Why do we see decades of headlines about modernization and reform in policing, billions spent, and yet we seem to end up with the exact same outcomes 5 years later?
So we want to understand the difference between structural change, which the sources call pruning the leaves.
Pruning the leaves, yeah.
Yeah.
And actual cultural transformation.
Which is healing the soil.
And that distinction is everything.
So let's get into the anatomy of this. I want to start with that visualization you mentioned from the source text. The bias impact tree.
Right.
It maps organizational dysfunction to the anatomy of a tree. And at the very top, the part everyone can see, you have the leaves.
Exactly. The leaves represent the visible symptoms. These are the things that end up on the nightly news, when a scandal breaks or when a budget report shows massive inefficiencies. That's a leaf.
And because they're so visible, I'm assuming these are the things that leadership always rushes to fix first.
Always. They're tangible. You can point to them and say, look, I fixed that. In the documents about Sir Mark Rowley's proposals, the leaves are things like tech inefficiencies, funding gaps, and this confusing organizational structure.
Okay, so let's look at his specific proposal through this lens. He says the system is a relic. His solution. Take the 43 distinct police forces across the UK.
43.
And merge them into fewer mega-forces. He wants to cut national bodies, invest heavily in technology.
It's a classic efficiency play. 43 fragmented forces, that sounds messy. Merging them sounds like a strong, decisive management move.
Right. It looks like you're doing something big.
It sounds like a solution. We're too small, let's get big. We're analog, let's get digital.
But according to the bias impact tree model, this falls into a trap. A trap called watering the leaves.
Yes. And if you know anything about gardening, that is just not how you save a dying tree.
No, it's not. If a leaf is brown and you pour water on it,
It just gets wet. And it stays brown. The critique in our source material is really sharp here. It argues that focusing on mergers and technology is addressing the symptoms of the dysfunction, not the cause.
the text actually has a line about this I found interesting. It warns that addressing only these layers risks mistaking reorganization for transformation.
That's the key distinction. Reorganization is moving boxes around on an org chart. Transformation is changing how the organism actually functions. And Rowley's plan, it's very heavy on reorganization.
And the sources say this is insufficient alone. It's not that better technology is a bad thing.
Of course not. Nobody wants the police using Windows 95.
Right, but it doesn't fix the tree.
Exactly. You can have the most advanced, streamlined megaforce in the world with the best AI. But if the underlying dynamic is broken, you've just created a more efficient delivery system for the same old problems.
So if mergers and tech upgrades are just the leaves, we need to go deeper. What are the roots in this model?
Okay, now we're going underground. The roots represent the structural causes. This is the internal operational infrastructure, and crucially, the cultural dynamics.
Hmm.
The sources explicitly call this the layer where bias thrives.
Where bias thrives.
Yeah.
So this isn't about whether the email server works. This is about how people inside the system relate to each other and to the public.
It's the machinery of the institution.
Yeah.
The sources list examples like bureaucratic silos, fractured accountability, resource scarcity, and toxic culture.
Let's unpack bureaucratic silos for a second. It sounds like boring corporate speak, but in policing, the consequences have got to be serious.
Oh, extremely serious. I mean, silos mean Department A isn't talking to Department B. Intelligence isn't shared. It means the rank and file officers are culturally isolated from the leadership.
And you can't have real accountability if no one sees the whole picture.
You can't. And toxic culture is listed right next to it.
And this is the critical connection the sources make, right, regarding Rowley's plan.
Yes, you can reorganize the branches, you can create your mega forces, but if the roots are still made of these silos and a toxic culture...
The tree's going to produce the same fruit.
Exactly. And there's a concept in the text that I found really powerful. Redistribution of bias.
Redistribution of bias. Tell me more about that.
Well, think about it. If you have a small police force with a culture of bullying or racism or misogyny, that's a root problem.
Okay.
Now, if you take that force and merge it into a massive mega force, without fixing that culture first, what have you really done?
You haven't eliminated the problem. You've just moved it into a bigger house.
You've industrialized it. You've redistributed that bias into a larger structure. And the sources argue that without treating the roots, bias is simply redistributed under a new structure.
You change the shape of the container, but the liquid inside is the same.
Precisely. And this is where that whole phrase, root and branch, starts to fail us. Because the sources argue that even if you dig down to the roots, even if you try to fix the silos and the accountability, it's still not enough.
Because the roots are sitting in something. They don't exist in a vacuum.
Right. We have to talk about the soil.
This feels like the core insight of this entire deep dive. The soil. It's the part of the metaphor that usually gets left out. What exactly is the soil in this context?
The soil represents the deep-seated beliefs, the history, and the foundational context of the institution itself. It's the environment in which the tree was planted and from which it draws its nutrients every single day.
Okay, but let's be specific. History and context, that can sound a bit abstract.
Yeah.
When we look at UK policing, or really any institution with a long legacy, what's actually in that soil, the sources are pretty blunt about it.
They do not sugarcoat it. The nutrients in this soil, according to the text, include a racialized policing legacy, deep community mistrust, systemic bias, and power imbalance.
So the tree is feeding on mistrust. It's drawing up power imbalance through its roots.
It's feeding on a history where the power dynamic was never designed to be equal. And this leads to maybe the most important quote in the documents we analyzed. It's a heavy line.
Okay.
You can't build justice on contaminated soil.
Wow. You can't build justice on contaminated soil. That just reframes this whole debate about modernization.
It completely shifts the focus. Structural change, the leaves and branches, it asks questions like, are we upgrading our technology? Or are we merging these two departments to save money?
Logical, logistical questions.
Right. But cultural transformation, the soil work, it asks something much more uncomfortable.
Which is?
It asks, are we changing the unspoken norms? Are we addressing the contaminated history that makes the community trust us less than zero? Are we willing to admit that the ground we stand on is part of the problem?
It makes you realize why so many of these reforms they feel like they're spinning their wheels. Leaders are trying to grow a healthy tree of safety and justice and trust.
But they're planting it in acid.
And then they wonder why the leaves keep turning brown. And the solution is to just plant the leaves. Green PR campaigns, new logos.
Or buy new leaves hiring sprees. But the soil remains untouched. And as long as the soil is untouched, the roots will always be poisoned.
But here's the challenge, right? The soil metaphor. Soil is vast. It's hard to measure historical mistrust or unspoken norms. It can feel a bit nebulous. How does an organization actually know how sick its soil is, or how ready they even are to begin cleaning it?
That's where the second tool comes in. It's called the 6 Stages Framework, or SSF. It's a diagnostic tool that maps institutional readiness for equity and inclusion on a numbered continuum.
And it's not just a generic good to bad scale, it's actually numbered.
Yeah, it's a 13-stage continuum. It goes from -6 all the way up to +6.
Okay, let's start at the bottom, the negative side, where things are actively going wrong. What does a -6 organization look like?
Stage -6 is labeled extremist leadership. This
Hmm.
isn't just, we have some problems. This is an institution where harmful practices are actively tolerated or, even encouraged by the people at the top.
So whistleblowers are punished. There's a culture of fear.
A palpable culture of fear. That's the darkest timeline. It's corruption.
Right.
Then you move up a little to -5, hostile culture. Here, you might not have a criminal running the show, but you have a complete denial of wrongdoing. You see disproportionate enforcement, certain groups getting targeted.
But the institution just minimizes it. They deny the harm.
Exactly. This is where you hear those classic defenses like, it's just a few bad apples, or you're taking this out of context. That denial is the hallmark of the negative scale.
Okay, and what about -2? You mentioned defensive awareness. That one sounds tricky.
It is tricky because awareness sounds positive. But at -2, the institution acknowledges that bias exists. They'll say, yes, racism is real, sexism is real,
But
but
it's elsewhere.
it's elsewhere. They say, society is biased, we hire from society, so of course we have some issues.
The deflection. We're not the source of the problem. We're just a mirror reflecting society back at itself.
Precisely. It's a very sophisticated way of avoiding responsibility. Don't audit us, look at the schools, look at the economy. That's defensive awareness.
And then we hit the pivot point, stage 0, stuck in the system. I feel like a lot of large organizations probably live here.
It's a very common place to be. Stage 0 is where leadership is just overloaded. Reform is entirely reactive. They only change things when a scandal forces them to.
Trust is low, but they're not necessarily hostile.
They're just paralyzed by the complexity of it all. They want to move, but the bureaucracy is holding them in place.
So how do you get out of that mud? What does the positive scale look like?
Stage +1 is courageous learning. This is a huge step. This is where bias is finally named, clearly, without deflection. Leadership expresses a genuine openness to listen, to consult, and to admit they don't have all the answers.
And just admitting there's a problem is a positive stage. That seems like a pretty low bar.
You'd think so, but remember where they're coming from. Moving from denial or deflection to actually naming it at +1 is a massive psychological leap for an institution. It requires vulnerability.
That's fair. It's the first step of recovery. What comes next?
Then you move to, say, +3, structural repair. This is where you stop talking and you actually start building. You design new systems to address the root harm. You define new equity metrics.
So you're not just saying we value diversity. You're measuring it and fixing the systems that undermine it.
Right, and at the very top of the mountain, stage +6, beacon of justice. This is an institution that models systemic repair on a global scale. It's the gold standard where the soil has actually been healed.
Okay, so we have the map. Let's apply this to the news. We've got Commissioner Rowley. He's out there saying the system is a relic, it's broken, it needs root and branch reform. Where does he sit on this scale?
The analysis in the source material is fascinating here. It suggests that Rowley's admission, his willingness to name the flaws, to call the system obsolete, that might place him personally, or at least his rhetoric,
That a +1?
at stage +1, courageous learning, or maybe even +2, reflective practice. Because he's not saying everything is fine, he's saying this is broken.
So he's stepped out of denial.
Correct. However, and this is a massive however, the sources warn us about a disconnect. While the leader might be at +1, where is the institution?
A rank and file. The culture on the street.
The culture might still be lagging way back in the negative stages. The organization itself could be in defensive awareness or even hostile culture.
That creates a massive tension. It's like an elastic band. You have a stage +1 leader trying to drag a stage -5 culture forward.
Yeah. Exactly. And that is where reform so often dies. Because the leader announces a big plan, but the culture, the soil, isn't ready to accept it. That friction leads to burnout, or the leader gets ousted, or the reforms just wither on the vine.
It's the old saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. But here, the stakes are people's lives and their civil liberties.
And this brings us right back to why that soil metaphor is so accurate. You can have a head gardener, the commissioner, who wants to plant new seeds. He has a bag of expensive seeds called mergers and new tech.
Right.
But if the ground is hard and packed and toxic,
The seeds won't take.
they can't.
So this leads to the practical question for everyone listening. We see these announcements all the time. Major reform announced, new strategy unveiled. How can we tell if a proposal is the real deal? How do we know if they're just pruning leaves or if they're actually trying to heal the soil?
The sources provide a tool for this. It's a kind of reform proposal scorecard, a set of litmus test questions you can ask whenever you see a new initiative.
I love a good checklist. What are the key indicators we should be looking for?
Okay, the first one is power and voice. You have to ask, is this reform designed for the community or is it co-designed with the community?
That sounds like a small semantic difference, but it's huge. We designed this for you is paternalistic.
It is. It assumes the institution knows best. We built this with you is partnership. Reforms without community power just reinforce the existing power dynamics, which, remember, are part of that contaminated soil.
So if the community isn't at the table with actual power, it's probably a leaf reform. It's cosmetic.
Almost certainly. Okay, second indicator, metrics. What are they actually measuring?
Right. Are they sticking to the traditional stuff like arrest volume and crime rates?
Or are they measuring trust levels and equity outcomes? Because you get what you measure. If you incentivize arrests, you get more arrests. If you incentivize trust, well, that's harder to do, but it changes behavior.
And traditional metrics often reinforce disproportionality.
100%. If you want structural repair, that stage +3 stuff, you need new KPIs that value fairness as much as efficiency.
Okay, and the third one?
Beliefs. Does the proposal explicitly address the unspoken norms and assumptions of the organization? Does it talk about culture? Or is it all just flowcharts and budget shifts?
If it doesn't mention beliefs, it's not touching the soil.
Exactly. If the report doesn't use words like bias, racism, or culture, it is avoiding the root cause.
So, bringing this full circle back to Commissioner Rowley, we started with his root and branch quote. Based on this scorecard, what's the verdict?
The conclusion from the sources is it's mixed but cautious. They acknowledge his diagnosis is correct. The 1962 model is broken. He's right to call it obsolete. But his solutions, the mergers, the tech upgrades, the efficiency drives are still largely structural. They're leaf and branch solutions.
So he's right about the problem, but maybe missing the depth of the cure.
According to these sources, yes. True success requires anti-racist leadership and a willingness to actually dig up that contaminated soil. Without that, a megaforce is just a larger, more efficient delivery system for the same old problems.
It really makes you rethink the word efficiency. We're obsessed with streamlining, but streamlining a broken process just gets you to a broken result faster.
That is the danger. Efficiency is not the same as justice, and often efficiency is the enemy of the slow, hard work of rebuilding trust.
Let's just quickly recap this journey, because the visual of the tree is something I want everyone to keep in mind. We started with the leaves.
The visible symptoms, the tech failures, the funding gaps, the confusing 43-force structure, easy to see, but fixing them doesn't save the tree.
Then we went down to the roots.
The structural causes, the silos, the toxic culture, the lack of accountability, that's the internal machinery where bias thrives.
And finally, the most important part.
The foil.
The deep-seated beliefs, the history, the power imbalances, the context that feeds the entire tree. And the takeaway is you cannot fix the tree by just watering the leaves. You have to heal the environment in which the institution grows.
Real change isn't about looking better or moving faster. It's about growing something different. And that starts in the ground.
It is a lot to chew on. And I want to leave you with a thought from the source material that I found really provocative. It's a question to ask yourself the next time you hear a leader announce some major overhaul.
The question is, when we say root and branch reform, are we actually willing to look at the soil, the beliefs, power structures, and blind spots that have always shaped the roots?
And critically, who benefits most from this change and who might still be excluded?
Because if the answer to who is excluded is the same group of people as before, then we haven't really changed anything at all.
That's the deep dive. Thanks for listening.